My sister-in-law showed up at my front door on a cold Tuesday evening in October with my 9-year-old nephew and a duffel bag that couldn't have held more than 3 days' worth of clothes. She was wearing that particular smile of hers, the kind where her lips do all the work and her eyes stay perfectly, unsettlingly still. "I need a favor," she said, already nudging my nephew through the door before I'd even answered. "Derek and I are heading to Calgary for work. Maybe 10 days, maybe 2 weeks. Can you take him?" I looked down at my nephew. He was standing in my entryway with his backpack on both shoulders, holding his dad's old hockey cap in both hands, twisting it slowly, the way he always does when he's trying not to cry. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my brother's son. My brother passed away 14 months ago. Pancreatic cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by May. He was 37. He left behind a 9-year-old boy, a house in Canada, and a sister, me, who promised him at the very end that she would always look out for his kid. I meant it then. I still mean it now. My sister-in-law took my brother's death as a starting point, not an ending. She had a new partner within 4 months of the funeral. By July, he'd moved into my brother's house. By September, my nephew was being left at my door with a bag that didn't even include his winter coat. She gave me a thin smile, patted my nephew once on the shoulder, the way you'd pat a stranger's dog, and walked back to her car, without looking back. The moment the front door clicked shut, the house went completely quiet. My nephew didn't move. He was still standing in the entryway, still twisting that cap. He looked up at me, and the expression on his face stopped me cold. He wasn't just sad. He wasn't just missing his mom. He looked the way my brother looked the morning. He got his diagnosis, like someone carrying a weight they don't know how to hand off to anybody. "Aunt Brooke," he said very quietly, "she's not going for work." I made him soup. I told him to take off his boots and come sit at the kitchen table, and I heated up chicken noodle soup. The real kind with the little pasta stars he's always liked. And I sat across from him and waited. He reached into the front pocket of his backpack and pulled out an old iPad with a cracked corner and a green protective case. His dad's. "She thinks she threw it out," he said. "She put it in the recycling bag before the depot run, and I took it back out before she noticed. I know the code. It's Dad's birthday." He unlocked it and slid it across the table to me. "Dad set something up before he got sick. He told me there was money saved for school and that the house would be mine when I turned 18. But she and Derek have been trying to take it." I didn't understand everything they were saying, but I heard them talking, and I took pictures of the papers she left out on the counter. I looked down at the screen. My hands went cold before I'd finished the second page. I'm a marketing coordinator. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a financial planner. But I know how to read, and what I read over the next 2 hours at my kitchen table. While my nephew quietly finished a second bowl of soup and then fell asleep on my couch under the spare blanket. Made my stomach drop in slow, sickening stages, like missing a step in the dark over and over again. My brother had set up an re-espic for my nephew 3 years before he died. A registered education savings plan. One of the things my brother had been most proud of, actually, because he'd started it from nothing and built it up month by month. At the time of his death, it held just over $42,000, including the government grants he'd accumulated. He'd also had a will prepared that left the family home in Canada to my nephew in trust until he turned 18, with my sister-in-law named as sole estate trustee. The emails on that iPad were between my sister-in-law and her boyfriend, and they were not careful. They weren't hiding anything, because they were certain no one was looking. The plan was clean, in a terrible way. Her boyfriend had found a mechanism to collapse the e-espic early, triggering tax penalties on the accumulated income portion, but walking away with the bulk of the funds. The Canada house had been quietly appraised 2 weeks earlier. I found the photographs on the iPad. A formal appraisal from a local real estate agency. No listing yet, but clearly the next step. And the reason for the Calgary trip, the reason my nephew had been so carefully deposited with me at exactly this moment. There was an estate court hearing scheduled in just over 50 hours. A routine trust review, triggered automatically by the planned property transfer at the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. Under provincial estate law, if the trust beneficiary lacked a designated advocate present at the hearing, the court would grant default administrative control to the sitting trustee. My sister-in-law wasn't going to Calgary for work. She was making herself unreachable until the window closed, and she'd left my nephew here because a 9-year-old boy sitting quietly in his aunt's spare room could not walk into a courtroom and stop what was about to happen to him. She thought she'd parked him somewhere safe and quiet until it was over. I sat at that table for a long time after the house went still, listening to my nephew breathe through the doorway, reading the same paragraphs over and over until they stopped feeling real and started feeling like something I had to fix. Then I stood up, found the folder I'd kept since my brother's estate was settled, and I called his lawyer. Her name was Ms. Ibarra. She specialized in estate and trust disputes. She had given me her card at the will reading, and she answered her phone at 10:15 at night without making me feel foolish for calling. I explained everything I had. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "Send me everything on that device. And don't reach out to your sister-in-law. Not a word that suggests you know anything." I sent the photos. I sent screenshots. I typed out a timeline of the past 14 months, every detail I could think of, and sent that too. Ms. Ibarra called back 40 minutes later. "We can file an emergency motion to name you as designated advocate before the hearing," she said. "But we need to move fast, and we need to be precise." If she suspects you've seen those documents, she could push the withdrawal through tonight. What do I do? Exactly what she expects you to do, Ms. Ibarra said. Be normal, be boring. Text her back like it's a regular Tuesday. I hung up. I looked at my phone. A message had come in from my sister-in-law while I was on the call. "How's he doing?" "Being good, I hope, lol." I typed back, "He's great, already asleep. Don't worry about a thing, safe travels." She sent a thumbs-up emoji, nothing more. I sat at my kitchen table until midnight, going through every document twice more, until I was certain my hands had stopped shaking enough to be useful. The next 36 hours were the longest of my life. Ms. Ibarra worked from her office, and I worked from my kitchen, and my nephew moved quietly between the couch and the table, bringing me crackers at one point with a look of genuine concern, as though he understood something significant was happening, even if he didn't know exactly what. I organized the documents by type. Financial records, separate from the correspondence sorted by date. Ms. Ibarra contacted the RBC branch that held the RESP to flag the pending early withdrawal and request it be held while the motion was reviewed. She filed the emergency motion with the court by end of day. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law sent me a photo of herself and her boyfriend at a hotel bar. She sent a video of snow outside their window. Authentic Calgary October, at least. I sent back a laughing emoji and told her my nephew and I had made pancakes for dinner. We actually had. He'd put a truly excessive number of blueberries into his and was deeply pleased with himself. By 10 o'clock the evening before the hearing, the motion was filed. The evidence package was assembled, and Ms. Ibarra had confirmed our time with the court clerk. My nephew asked me at bedtime whether everything was going to be all right. I sat on the edge of the bed and told him yes. I told him his dad had been very careful and very smart, and that he'd made sure his son was protected. I told him that some people had tried to take what his dad left him, and that they weren't going to succeed. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Dad always said you were the most stubborn person he'd ever met." It was the first time I'd laughed in 2 days. I told him his dad wasn't wrong, and I turned off the light. The courtroom was on the 4th floor of a gray stone building off Elgin Street. Small, wood-paneled, smelling faintly of old carpet and photocopier toner. My sister-in-law and her boyfriend were already at the applicant's table. When we arrived, their lawyer between them, Documents spread out in front of them like a quarterly report. They were relaxed. They were composed. They had already won in their minds. Ms. Ibarra walked in first. I followed. My nephew walked beside me, dressed in his school clothes, the hockey cap tucked into his jacket pocket. My sister-in-law turned when she heard the doors open. The composure left her face so quickly. It was like watching something drain. Her boyfriend reached for her arm. She shook him off, rising partway from her chair. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was pulled too tight. "You were supposed to be watching him at home." "I am watching him," I said. The words came out steadier than I'd expected. "I'm watching out for him." The judge called the room to order. Ms. Ibarra presented the emergency motion first, establishing my standing as designated advocate. Then she laid out the evidence. Every email, every photograph my nephew had taken of documents left carelessly on a kitchen counter. The RBC's records showing the pending RSP withdrawal flagged by the branch. The appraisal, the timeline of transfers and preparations, all of it meticulously dated and cross-referenced. The courtroom went very quiet. The judge reviewed each document as it was submitted. His expression moved, slowly and with some deliberation, from neutral to something that was not neutral at all. Her boyfriend's lawyer objected twice. The judge instructed him to sit down both times. At some point, maybe 15 minutes in, maybe 20, her boyfriend leaned toward my sister-in-law and said something in a low voice. She pulled away. He said it again. She turned to him and, in a voice that was meant to be private, but was not, said that this had been his idea. He said it had been hers. The judge set his pen down on the desk in a way that made both of them fall silent immediately. He revoked my sister-in-law's status as a state trustee, effective at the close of the hearing. He ordered the pending RSP withdrawal cancelled and the account frozen pending a full audit of the estate. He referred the conduct matter to the Office of the Children's Lawyer and directed both respondents to appear at a separate hearing regarding breach of fiduciary duty. Before adjourning, he looked directly at my nephew, who was sitting beside me with his hands folded on the table, perfectly still, and told him that his father's estate would be properly overseen from this point forward. My nephew nodded, very seriously, very quietly, the way his dad always did when something meant more than he wanted to show. In the weeks that followed, the consequences moved in the way consequences do once they've been officially set in motion. The trust audit confirmed that nearly $11,000 had already been withdrawn from a secondary estate account before the hearing, funds that were eventually recovered through court order, though not without additional proceedings. The real estate agent who had prepared the appraisal filed her own complaint. Once she understood what the valuation had been intended to support, her boyfriend's employer, a financial planning firm in Nepean, let him go before the month was out. My sister-in-law and her boyfriend retained separate counsel almost immediately, which told you everything you needed to know about how much they trusted each other when things stopped going their way. The court appointed a corporate trustee to oversee the remaining estate. The rare SIP is intact. The house in Canada is secure. When the court asked where my nephew would be living during the guardianship review, I had already submitted the paperwork. He's been with me for 3 months now. I moved my desk into the living room and turned my office into his room. He has a duvet with little hockey sticks on it because he asked very politely if he could have one, and I told myself I'd figure out the rest as I went along. Most evenings he does homework at the kitchen table while I make dinner. His teacher sent a note home last week saying he'd made a close friend in his class, a boy named Marco, who lives 2 streets over and has been at our place 4 times this month. Last Tuesday, I drove them both to a Sens game at Canadian Tire Center. They ate too many hot dogs and debated loudly the entire drive home about something that happened in the 3rd period. It was one of the best evenings I can remember in a long time. I didn't plan to become someone's guardian. I wasn't prepared for it, And I won't pretend these past 3 months have been simple or easy, or that I've done everything right. But there's something of my brother that lives in my nephew's face. In the way he furrows his brow when he's reading something difficult, in the way he says, "Thank you" every single time, without fail, like he genuinely means it. Every time I see it, I think about the promise I made at the end. Standing up to someone in your own family, someone who was supposed to love that child the way you love him. It isn't something you feel brave doing. You feel scared and tired, and like you might be making a mistake every single step of the way. What carried me through wasn't courage. It was the image of a 9-year-old boy, standing in my entryway on a cold October evening, twisting his father's hockey cap in both hands, deciding to trust me with the thing he'd been carrying alone. He trusted me to show up, and for once in my life, I was stubborn enough to follow through. If you've ever found yourself standing between a child and someone who was supposed to protect them, you already know the moment I'm describing. The one where staying quiet stops being an option. What would you have done? I'd genuinely like to know.